Some of the greatest walk-on music in the history of public events. We're Postcommodity. There are three of us. Raven Chacon, who couldn't join us today. Cristobal Martinez, who's also a professor of new genres at San Francisco Art Institute. Myself, Cade Twist, and I'm also a professor at Otis College of Social Practice. We formed Postcommodity to do a few things. Primarily shift the discourse around indigenous art outside of this fixed binary of us versus them, or Indian versus non-Indian, indigenous versus non-indigenous. We wanted to complicate the discourse and also recover new meaning, new knowledge. And the project we're going to talk to you about today is something that's very dear to our hearts, but it all started with something so simple. I don't know if you guys have heard about this or seen them, but it's a bird repellent product called a scare eye balloon. You hang it up in a tree, it allegedly scares away birds for about a minute, and then they come back, have a party on the balloon. But it's a sphere about 12 inches, and it's very interesting. When we looked at that balloon, we saw one of the most interesting consumer product indigenous ready-mades that we've ever seen, because it's spherical. It has medicine colors, or indigenous medicine colors, red, yellow, black, and white, and it has an iconography that's very unique. It's intended to scare away birds, repel birds, by this corporation who designed it, Bird Be Gone. But it's an indigenous iconography that exists throughout the Americas, from South America all the way up into Canada. And there's something about that iconography that demonstrates the interconnectedness of indigenous peoples throughout the hemisphere that we were really, really drawn to.
So we can probably roll the video. So repellent fence via repelente was installed at the U.S.-Mexico border near the cities of Douglas, Arizona, and Agua Prieta, Sonora. It is a 2-mile-long land art work. We oftentimes characterize it as a 4-day ephemeral monument, or a grounds for 4 days of indigenous reimagined ceremony. The piece is comprised of 26 large-scale scare-eye balloons, with 1 mile of the work in the United States and 1 mile in Mexico. So this is a 2-mile-long sculpture that intersected the U.S.-Mexico border in early October of 2015. The balloons tethered to the desert landscape and floating approximately 100 feet above the desert floor.
So our collective is based in the Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and we're very close to the borderlands. We've all grown up in the borderlands region, and there's something that we found to be missing from the public discourse around immigration and around the border itself, and it's a lack of acknowledgement of the indigeneity of the people who are crossing the border, people who have been going north and south for trade and war and everything else since time immemorial. But for whatever reason, the people who cross this border where it now exists are sort of delegitimized as just members of nations, like Mexican or Salvadorian or Guatemalan. So one thing that we wanted to do is to indigenize the land of the borderlands, to bring an acknowledgement and to recover memory of our indigeneity, and to try to shift the discourse so that the indigenous backgrounds, the indigeneity of the people who are crossing, it would be acknowledged more clearly. So we saw this iconography as a way to culturally repatriate that iconography and bring it back to the land from which it came. And at the same time, allow the land itself to become a mediator of this 4-day ceremony.
So to build public memory and to recover knowledge, we're working on transborder context. And so what's really challenging and what you're seeing is you're seeing the manifestation of 8 years of fundraising that includes 3 years of very intense binational diplomacy in a situation or a place that we refer to as the most geospatially contested or geopolitically contested places in the Western Hemisphere. So there are intense tensions in the region that are articulated by the state, by corporations, underground organizations, as well as a large array of citizen actors, which are all implicated. And so we had to spend a lot of time learning about the border. We were particularly interested in the Arizona, working within the state of Arizona and the state of Sonora in Mexico, particularly because Arizona was a sort of epicenter at the time of the immigration debate. And so after spending about a year visiting all border towns and meeting people along the border and getting to know the border, we eventually came across a sort of political Goldilocks zone where the political situation wasn't too hot and it wasn't too cold, it was just right. And what was so special about the city of Douglas, Arizona, Agua Prieta, Sonora, and you can imagine this is a city that is bisected by a wall. It's not unlike Berlin in Germany during the Cold War. And so what was special and unique about this transborder city is that, people are family. There are transborder families and people who live on both sides, and there's still a very vivid memory of a time before a wall, before an iron wall, and before all of this sort of vitriolic rhetoric that has emerged through these politics of fear. So the cities had developed a memorandum of understanding. And their goal for their memorandum of understanding was to try to reverse the desocializing effects of the U.S.-Mexico border by agreeing to work together with each other at all sectors of society. So culturally, politically, and socially. And so the cities of Douglas, Arizona, and Agua Prieta, Sonora, they chose themselves for Indigenous Reimagined Ceremony, and the purpose of Repellent Fence through the community's own self-determined narrative is that they would come to position the work as an opportunity to operationalize their MOU. Thank you.
Hey guys.
Hello.
I had a thought. So we're in Canada, and I think they're renegotiating NAFTA right now. Isn't this what brings the U.S., Canada, and Mexico together? Also spawned the Zapatista Revolution, if my memory serves. They happened at the same time. I was thinking about the Zapatistas, and I don't think it's ungermane to your project, because there was a certain kind of call for a more radical interpretation of borders in general and an autonomous movement. Just kind of riffing here a little bit, how does that kind of Zapatismo, does that influence your work at all? And certainly, I was thinking about, to me, it's like we're working, here we are at the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, and I think like you can almost think of like the Zapatista movement, people called it the postmodern movement, but there's certainly hints of that still need to be built on. How does that inform your kind of political practice as well as aesthetic practice?
Okay, so we're not postmoderns. We're mestizos and Native Americans in Postcommodity. So we operate via frameworks of Native self-determination and sovereignty. And the work of the Zapatistas is inspiring, politically inspiring, but our work is up to something entirely different. We're not revolutionaries. What we are is we're artists, and we're trying to we're trying to mediate complexity, because it's been our observation that that societies in North America are polarizing in accordance to the logics of partisanship. And so our role is to try to build a deeper and more complicated discourse.
And Marxism is nothing more than another version of the Judeo-Christian Western scientific worldview, which hasn't been so helpful thus far. Yeah. So I don't think we'll find any, beauty in it moving forward. It's definitely not an indigenous methodology or practice or worldview. And I think there's a lot of mistaken and positioned perspectives that are trying to position indigenous people within a Marxist lens, because the Euro-Western scientific worldview gaze wants to recreate things in their own image. Mm-hmm. And that's not us, and that's not indigenous people anywhere.
And we acknowledge that the communist discourse played a major role in the Zapatista movement. And of course, the Zapatistas presented a unique opportunity, or that was a political Goldilocks zone, because those were some of the political stances that Mexico was aligning with in its some of the earlier years of its formation as a nation state. We just like to help overcome some of the Genesis amnesia that I believe we're all suffering of. Just to remember that the word Mexico derives from the word Mexica, which is a native word. And so in terms of moving outside of complexity and taking a political position, we're kind of wondering how the hell Native people who are operating on their own ancestral homelands have come to be called aliens in their own home.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.